All right. So I have Dr. Brittany Barreto here. Hello, Brittany.
Hey.
Or actually, do you want to, or do you go by Brittany or Dr. Barreto?
Depends on who's talking to me, but for you, you can call me Britt. We're friends.
Sweet, sweet. Just making sure, since I know it's an important thing. Um, yeah. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Today's my birthday. And
Woo!
31. So funny. Last year when I turned 30, I swear it was like a 12-month countdown to my 30th birthday. I had questions about what I was doing with my life. I had thoughts about plans and goals I wanted to make. It just felt so like a very important birthday. And then this year it was like 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, my birthday is coming up. It was totally different experience. But
Yeah,
today's going great.
it's those milestones. It's like you turn there's like a zero at the end, and it's like I feel like I should think about my life.
Yeah, I'm like the last decade, what has happened? And a lot's happened in the last decade. So I also just think there was just a lot to process.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was doing a little bit of background reading on you. I mean, we've known each other for a few years now. So
Yes,
like
I
I don't
love
even
that.
remember where how we met exactly. It's like that
Yeah,
blur.
I mean, yeah, you were introduced to me way early in my FemTech career, so I can't even remember who made that intro. But I was prepping for this and I was like, Liz is my friend. We'll be fine. It'll be natural.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like, and well, I remember or just kind of going to like just like okay, so quick background. I know you as just like the femtech person. Like I know
Yeah.
you do a lot of different things in femtech now, and it's just kind of broadly femtech. But yeah, I remember the one thing that when I was like looking on your website and like looking at your bio was you did the passion parties or like the
Yeah.
the um
Yeah.
the home novelty parties, and like I did
Yes.
that too. And then I was like, oh yeah, like I think we talked about this at some point, or there was something
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, there's been a really interesting femtech, sex tech journey throughout my whole life, but I didn't know it until I got into femtech. And then I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been set up for this life. There's been so many little touch points here and there throughout the journey.
Yeah, and like that was also probably before femtech was even a word. Like when
Oh
you got
yeah, no,
started
no,
with
no.
passion parties, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't even familiar with the word sex tech. I mean, talk about the last decade in review. I think I was 2021 doing passion parties. So, it was a little while ago.
Wait, or back last year you were still doing passion parties?
Oh, no, 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 no. About a
Oh,
decade ago, 2021.
okay.
I just turned 31.
Go. Oh my gosh, I was mixing up. Oh, there's too many.
Yeah,
You're
today's not my
31.
21st birthday.
It's yeah, I know. I'm like
I was still
I
in
thought
sex
you were
toys
talking
at
about
10.
that would be a very interesting backstory, but that's not that.
No, 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 no. It's interesting, but it's all like also kosher. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, so I guess like in terms of high level, like how would you describe your career now? And then we'll get into like some of the building blocks of like what led you to where you are now.
Sure, yeah. So today I am a leader in this industry called FemTech, and FemTech is defined as solutions to conditions that solely, disproportionately, or differently affect female, women, and girls. And so I'll break that down very briefly because I think it just helps with the whole setting of the stage. So first of all, it's women, female, and girls because not everyone who identifies as a woman, there's lots of people with vaginas, and you can be any gender you want. There's also a lot of people with pelvic floors, that you can have any gender you want. So we're really clear on we just want to help anyone with a vulva, but also even if you don't have a vulva, there are things about being a woman in healthcare and estrogen and stuff that like absolutely has to do with femtech. So we are kind of loose around that. But at the end of the day, somebody will come to me and say like, oh, we have a solution for erectile dysfunction that helps women. And I'm like, well, no, that's not gonna qualify. But anyways, solutions to conditions that solely, so things that only affect females. So like menstruation, menopause, maternal health, disproportionately. So things that disproportionately affect us, like autoimmune disease or migraines, osteoporosis, bone health, or things that differently affect us. So heart disease manifests very differently in a female heart. Things that, injuries, sports injuries will show up differently. Things that just look different in our female body, how we metabolize things, how we process things. So that's FemTech. And the reason that we even needed FemTech was because medicine and healthcare has been based on a male paradigm, and women are currently suffering the consequences accordingly. So quick example, women have 5 times more side effects to therapeutic drugs than men do. And that is because the dosages and most of the cell lines, animal models, clinical trials done have predominantly been male based. So women are today thinking healthcare is made for them, but it's really made for the average Caucasian male and then just given to us. So that needs to change. And I hope one day FemTech can just be healthcare, but just calling it healthcare has not led to enough female-centered innovation. So we need this industry. One day, I hope we don't need it anymore. But for right now, we absolutely need it. We need to have these conversations about sex-specific healthcare innovation. So what I do today is I run a nonprofit called FemTech Focus, and we have 2 main missions. Our first is to raise awareness for the need for sex-specific healthcare innovation, like we're doing right now, and then to provide resources to the founders innovating in the space, because I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a founder, and I think that the founders in FemTech and women's health are working so hard and they are doing such important work that I feel very protective of them and I feel very proud of them. And they're some of my favorite people like you. So I want to do whatever we can to provide them with the resources they need to get their solutions to market, because women need it. So I will try to specify between female and women when appropriate biologically, but I hope you know in my definition that I mean all the above. And but yeah, those are our 2 missions, and we've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And we have 4 main offerings: a podcast, a virtual community, market research, and events. So I'm happy to dive into any of those, but you were on my podcast. It was definitely one of the best, most listened to episodes actually out of almost 200. So
Oh, wow.
you still are up there, Liz.
Wow, I didn't know I was in the running for that. That's
oh
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's hard to really overstate too, like going to your point about like how there hasn't been that much attention towards women's health or health for people with vulvas. Like I remember there's all these little different stats that people have thrown around, but like it's still kind of crazy to me that like the NIH and don't tell me if I'm off with like the years and stuff, but yeah how that like the NIH wasn't required to have like to include women in research that was funded until like 1993, was it?
So that actually was that you have to include females in clinical trials. So in the 70s, there was a drug in clinical trials that really affected fetuses. And so everyone got in an uproar, and it's a terrible thing, horrible thing that happened, right? But everyone was like, oh my God, we must preserve the womb. And so females were removed from clinical trials for about 2 decades.
Entirely.
Yeah,
right?
entirely. Yeah. Pregnant, breastfeeding, or none of the above, doesn't matter. You're not included. We're just going to work on men. We're going to preserve your fertility and your womb because that's your like quote unquote top priority as a female in our society. We'll put a pin in that. Yeah. But
Yes. Okay.
in 1993, it was overturned and said like, no, we have to have females in this. Like, but we obviously have to have precautions around breastfeeding and maternal health, which is what they should have done in the first place. But whatever, they went a little too far. So, but the NIH didn't require that scientists that had NIH grant funding include sex as a biological variable, i.e., like females, because the paradigm was male. They didn't require that until like, I think it was 2016. So, it really wasn't that long
Really?
ago. Oh, yeah.
Oh my
It was only a few years ago that they said that you have to include females in your research. And even today, I just recently gave a TEDx Pfizer talk. And at the end of my talk, I said, please, start to tease apart. Don't just, okay, you're required to include females, but please tease that data apart, because you're summarizing male and female, which may like show that the drug is working well enough. But if you separate the male and female data sets, you may see that it's actually very good for males and actually not so great for females. And so, it was shocking, Liz, how many scientists and physicians I met at Pfizer that were like, oh, I'm going to relook in my data. And I was like, wow, oh my God, I really wish this wasn't that news to you. Like, I'm excited that this has made an impact. I'm also devastated that it's made an impact.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so yeah, so for those listening out there, this is pretty important.
This is
Like what
absolutely critical. This is
yeah.
super critical. I'll give you another statistic, speaking of like pharmaceutical NIH and research. In last year, there was, so in the last few years, there's been about 700 drugs that have been approved by the FDA, therapeutic drugs. Of those 700, 75% did not have any data on pregnant or breastfeeding women. And they just
Oh,
said,
that's cool.
they just say, ask your doctor. And I have asked my doctor, and I said, do you guys get like a special pamphlet or like special info? Like, what do you know that we don't? And they don't know anything additional. They're just passing the responsibility and the buck down. But if you think about it, 75% of the therapeutic drugs that have come out, and women aren't pregnant for a weekend, right? We're either trying to get pregnant, are pregnant, or breastfeeding for years at a time. We can't expect women to just not take medicine, whether that's for a
Right.
chronic condition, a mental illness, or an infection. That it's still absolutely abysmal, our current like state of innovating and improving female health and wellness. And that's why I wake up every day and talk about vaginas.
I mean, it's important. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking like when I was looking at the like what to talk about, like you have this in terms of like what are some of the consequences of like not focusing on health for women. But then also like there's also the marketplace side too of like how big is this market? Like how important is it? How big is it? How big of a like I mean, like in terms of like an opportunity for businesses, but I mean, how big is this for people to like care about in terms of like putting a dollar sign since it's
100%.
like, yeah, since at least like we know this and we could talk a little bit about this too during this episode is like you have this idea of something that will help women and people with vulvas, and then you go and present it to like a VC or you're a fund that's focusing on it and you go to like an LP and they're like, oh, it's only helping like 50% of the population or like there might be all sorts of reasons, but that's one that comes up a lot in terms of
Yep.
feedback from people. But yeah, like how big is this like in terms of like putting a dollar sign to it and like comparing it to other markets that
That's
people
right.
might be looking at?
Yep. So, one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about is quantifying femtech and sex tech, because if you can't measure it, if you don't have a number, you can't improve it, right? How can you improve something that it's just a black box? And so when I first got into femtech, there was an article that came out by Frost and Sullivan, which is a really fantastic healthcare life science consulting firm. They claim that femtech was worth 50 billion, so 50 billion, which sounds like a big number, but menstrual pads alone are a $37 billion market. And so it just didn't make sense to me, like how the rest of women's health outside of menstrual pads, was 12 billion. Like, it didn't make sense to me. And,
Right.
honestly, it was just that nobody had really sat down and crunched the numbers. And so FemTech Focus, proudly, I can say, last year published our FemTech landscape report. And we quantified the market being closer to $1.1 trillion. $1.1 trillion. And so this is the global market. And I am happy to go on record and say, I don't even think that number is correct. And I think it's even much bigger, because what we did was we broke down health into about 27 categories of health, whether that be bone health, brain health, chronic conditions, and then your obvious ones, menopause, menstruation, maternal health. And then we broke all those down, took percentages of how many female patients are, with that disease, and broke it down. There was actually a lot of things, like the PMS market. No one's quantified the PMS market. Like, how big of a market is like menstrual pain and emotion. So it was like, okay, this seems super critical to our number, and yet nobody else has even done the research on it. So there's a whole lot of numbers missing from that 1.1 trillion. So it's even bigger than that. And in fact, there's been such a history of viewing women's health as niche. So that's a word that they use a lot. Oh, it's very niche, meaning like really, really, really specific. How can you make $1 billion company selling something to such a small amount of people? Well, that is absolutely crazy sauce, because women are not like a very few and far between. We're 51% of the population. We, like, again, we're not pregnant for a weekend. This is years of our lives that we are menstruating, pregnant, breastfeeding, or just like living with a vagina that gets yeast infections or STIs. Like, it doesn't even need to be like whether or not you want to have kids. Like, it just literally is existing as a person with a vulva and the conditions that come along with that. What happens, and you alluded to it, is that investors say, urinary incontinence, meaning like you pee your pants when you laugh or something, that's not a very big market. I've never met anyone with it. Now, that statement alludes to a few things. One, we have such intense social stigma that the 1 in 3 women that have urinary incontinence, we don't even see them or hear from them, because there's such societal pressures for them to not talk about it, to keep it private, to keep it to themselves. So we have society taboos, is one thing. Number two, most of these investors are male. And so they are oftentimes not personally relating to the problem. And if their wife or girlfriend doesn't have the problem, then you're pretty much screwed, because they are convinced at that point that it doesn't exist. And
or
then
if they don't say they have the problem, is the other one too.
Yeah, because of problem number one, right? Societal taboo.
Yep.
And then 3, there's unfortunately this ego in the investor world where you inform them gently as you might about this $1.1 trillion market, and the ego is so big, they say, how come I've never heard of this? I invest in healthcare. I've been investing in healthcare for 3 decades, or whatever. How did I not know that this thing called FemTech existed? And then second of all, that it's worth $1 trillion. And so it's been really interesting. A year since we published that market size, we've had founders come back and say, thank you for quantifying this. I cannot use this number because they think I'm lying. Like they literally think I'm exaggerating it. So it's, we've seen over the years that apparently science and data doesn't necessarily convince everybody, but I'm hoping we all can get on board with this number that was scientifically quantified.
Has the experience, so also you're a partner or what's the official title?
Yeah, I'm a co-founder.
Coyote Ventures.
Yeah, co-founder of Coyote Ventures, and I currently operate as an advisor, and I sit on the investment committee.
Got it. Okay, so have you seen that there's a difference between like having conversations with LPs versus having conversations with investors? And quick, LPs are limited partners. They're the people that venture capital basically fundraises to. Is the very, very basic. You could probably get more into it, but that's kind of the very basic.
Very basic. Yeah. Well, I think that what's the difference between the two? honestly, across the board, it's a lot of education. It's a lot of introducing the concept. It's a lot of, getting them up to speed. But what I will say is that femtech as a term and as an industry is being recognized more and more. I can remember in 2019 saying the word femtech and no one knew what I was saying. They thought I was either saying fintech, like financial technology, or I was saying female founders and I was just some like shortening it to femtech. No, to not either, both of those. It is, innovation in women's health. Today I probably have to define, I have a habit of just defining it anyways because of years of no one knowing what it is. But I will say that over 50% of the time I don't have to define it because people are like, oh yeah, I've heard about this, I've read about this. Even our $1 trillion market number was featured in Crunchbase, excuse me. But I was mixing PitchBook and Crunchbase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crunchbase did an article on our thing, and they're really widely respected as a leader in technology and innovation. So obviously they looked at our raw data and believed it. And so it is starting to become mainstream, which is so exciting for me. So exciting. But I would say that LPs and investors are on the same level in terms of understanding and belief. They still have a lot of misconceptions. They still have a lot of narrow thinking about it. But again, it's because I think the biggest thing is that, investing is one part logic, like financial models and IP and stuff. But the other half, and I'm talking half, it's not even like a sprinkle, like half of an investment decision is intuition. How much am I personally passionate about this? Because investors invest in things because then they go to conferences or golfing or networking event and they talk about this hot new deal they just put money into. And if you have created a cream for chapped nipples, this investor may or may not be excited about talking about that publicly, right? With their friends and their colleagues, whether that's because they feel uncomfortable or they're worried they're going to put their foot in their mouth, they'll say something wrong. Like they think it's safer to just not invest, and safer to invest in something that they feel more comfortable talking about.
Got it. And also going back to, I guess, the number, is there like another market that you could compare, like another, I guess, widely known market you can compare that 1.2 trillion number to in terms of
Yeah.
just how big that is?
I mean, it's pretty big.
Yeah, that's a
um
big number. But I
It's a big
figure,
number. It's
yeah, if
hard to
there's
break it. It's hard. It's funny you say that, Liz, because I can't just say, well, it's like healthcare or it's like, hygiene products or it's like sex toys because femtech is all the above. We are medical devices and we are therapeutic drugs and we are diagnostic tools, but we're also tampons. We're also, specially made bras after mastectomy. We are, the lioness. So it is a really, I think, freaking awesome industry because it's so dynamic. You're looking at all these different parts of health and wellness, whether that be a digital health app or, a special wipe for your vagina after sex. Like all of these things contribute to a female or woman's health and wellness. And so it's hard to, and I think that's why there's such opportunity, but it's also been hard to get there because women have unfortunately in our society been reduced to like the womb, right? And so the idea of innovating for the 70-year-old woman who's had, her hip broken twice is not as sexy as sending a spaceship to Mars, right? So unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Like that is okay, that is a hard comparison to do. So I think, yeah, so it is interesting that it is so incredibly broad. And like
Yeah.
there's also there's like so many different fun things about doing it. Like
Mhm.
we get like, people asking like, do you have any job openings or do you have any internships, like every week? But also
Yeah.
there's these different challenges that come up in terms of like operating a company in this space, depending on where you
100%.
sit. But yeah, and I think you kind of know where I'm going with this one in terms of some of the censorship, some of the like
Mhm.
difficulty of just talking about it with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a blessing and a curse, and we're going to grow through this. But femtech becoming mainstream means more attention, more money, more resources, which is phenomenal. And yet, I'm starting to see what I'm like a little worried about, which is going to be okay, is people who have been working in healthcare innovation thinking, oh, I can just start to do femtech stuff now too, because it's just like healthcare. But there are a lot of very unique things to femtech. So, for example, like you said, censorship. If you're going to have something direct to consumer or even clinical trial like recruitment, your ads are so often blocked. And it's not just sex tech stuff or things that, literally say the word vagina. It's things like fertility devices as being called inappropriate. Anything that has to do with the word breastfeeding, they think, oh, breast. And I think to myself, okay, so these algorithms know the difference between chicken breast and breastfeeding, right? So you can't just even blame the algorithm for saying, oh, it just doesn't like the word breast, because I'm pretty sure like there's lots of other types of like breasts out there that are allowed to be advertised anyways. So we have censorship is a big issue for us. We have business models is a big issue for us. So we lack billing codes. So if you're going to start an accelerator program and you're going to have, medical devices in your accelerator program, if you do not have a specific class and mentor on how do you file your own billing codes, you're just setting those startups up for failure. Because, what do investors ask you? They say, how are you going to get paid? And if your thing is, oh, insurance will cover it, the next question is, what's the billing code? And more times than not in femtech, there are no billing codes for women's health. Like you may be like, wait, what are you talking about? What I'm talking about is that in the 90s, we were still using the word hysteria as a billing code for anything that had to do with your uterus. In the 90s, hysteria for endometriosis. Speaking of endometriosis, affects 1 in 10 women, still considered a specialty billing code. So what that means is that like it's a rare code that insurance can pay on an optional basis. Essentially, like it's usually not covered. And so this is a 1 in 10 women's condition. This is not some rare disease. It's absolutely prevalent, and it's it's a chronic condition practically. You're working through it on a daily basis. So we lack billing codes. We obviously have our fundraising gap, right? Like, how do you get funding? Especially when the first 10 slides of most femtech decks are like, here's the vagina. Like, I'm going to give you a sex ed class because you probably don't even know how this works. Like, here's how women's bodies work. So we have funding issues, billing code issues, censorship, like the list goes on and on. And so I'm excited to see new thought leaders coming into the space, new programs being formed. But I do always want to tell those people, like, please consult with some femtech expert. Obviously, I'm available. I'm happy to do that. But even if it's not me, there's other femtech experts or sex tech or women's health experts that can help guide you to the right, structure of your program. Because what I don't want to happen is that people just throw money into femtech, or that people just start these programs and all the companies fail and they blame femtech, because it's not femtech's fault. It's because the structure was, you just tried to copy and paste your healthcare curriculum, into femtech curriculum. And that just can't be the case.
Right. Yeah. Do you know whatever happened to that wandering womb hysteria billing code? Like, did they quash it or did they change it?
I bet they changed it because they were using it for a lot of stuff. I don't know what the new terminology is, but they finally no longer have hysteria as a billing code in your medical record. Thank God.
Yeah, I would say the one, I hate it, but the one benefit of having that would be, yeah, you could technically lump a bunch of things into hysteria. Like, yes. I could make a case for lioness potentially with I'd have to look at the details, but like make a case for, it's like, sure, hysteria, it gets covered by insurance, like, great,
Liz, but, love that. I love that creativity. And, I'm thinking about that right now in terms of, it's a tough time, and I don't want to bring down the energy of this podcast, but the Roe v. Wade stuff, I do think there's opportunity to be creative here. There's opportunity to, for example, we discovered the compound for the abortion pill back in the 60s, and we have not done any research on any other compounds. There are absolutely other like molecular compounds out there in the world that could probably induce an abortion, maybe even sooner or faster or safer or whatever. But nobody's like screened and looked for it, and now these laws are against that specific compound. So similar to, I guess, marijuana and like Delta 8, like you tweak it a little bit, you can get to market. So I'm not saying like we should like tweak shit in a basement and try to sell it, but what I'm saying is that I think with innovation comes creativity, and with creativity comes, possibility. So I'm upset about the current state of women's health in the United States specifically, but I'm trying to think about it in terms of like the pandemic was horrible, and yet now everyone's totally down with remote work and telehealth. The Russian war in Ukraine is horrible, and now everyone's also like, so we should definitely get off of gas and oil. Like we should really start to think about the wind and sun more often. And I hope this is our opportunity for us to say, wow, look at the consequences of this. How can we really double down on women's health and wellness, because they deserve so much more. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm working towards.
Yeah, let me know if any hysteria like billing codes come up.
Yes, I will.
Yeah. Well, not
we'll just
it doesn't have to be hysteria, but
actually we are hysterical. You know what? You should put that back on the books.
Yeah, it's like, okay. I'm getting too deep and nerdy into like healthcare billing codes, but yeah, I think that is something that a lot of people, like entrepreneurs included, especially starting out, don't consider in terms of like, how do you bring this to market? Because even for like I've looked at Kegel exercisers and like what the billing code looks like for that.
Yeah.
And like specifically there was something about like having, like you had to have some sort of like electrical output for it. So like there's the electrostimulation.
Yeah.
That is part of the Kegel devices that you have to build in for it to be part of the billing code. So like all the ones that are just like sensor only are not covered by US insurance.
Yeah. And if you are a founder in an accelerator program and they're just like build, and all of a sudden you go to market and you look up your billing code and it gets denied, like what? You may have just wasted $10 million in 5 years of your life, on something that now you have to wait on the Congress to approve of your petition for billing code. So these are all the things that I'm like, you got to think about it. And I know you've definitely seen this problem, and I love you, Liz, because you're addressing it head on, which is the lack of data and research. So there is such a lack of data and research on women's health that most startups, their first round of fundraising really does go into research. They know the product they think they want to make, but there's such a lack of data that they have to actually do their own experiments. And I love that Lioness is, collecting that data and analyzing it and for good, and, improving women's health and wellness.
Yeah. We're one of the guinea pigs, I might say, in terms of being in the FemTech space of like, oh, we're going to build this thing. And like, yeah, the further we got into building this device to track orgasms and arousal, the further we like looked at the research, and it was like, oh my God, like what research is out there? Is it just this? Is it just like this thing? And it's like, yes, it's just this thing. And it's like, oh
yeah. Speaking of the lack of research and data for women's health, I recently went to the seminar on leaky gut, which essentially is bacteria from your gut is entering the bloodstream and it's affecting your brain. And so they've shown leaky gut can be associated with anxiety and depression. But in this presentation they had on the slide, it said, proven in 16 male participants. And I raised my hand and I said, oh, this is only for males. And he goes, oh, no. It's both, both sexes. And I said, it says on your slide, 16 males. And he was like, huh. I guess I'll have to look into it. But again, I was like, why are people not thinking about vaginas? Like, why do I have to continue to remind them to consider females in their experiments? And then I followed that up with, which, by the way, the bacteria you're talking about lives in the vagina too. So how has the industry proven that it's not leaky vagina syndrome? I mean, obviously, because it happens to both sexes, like it can't just be the vagina, but nevertheless, like, has anyone looked into like leaky vulva, like leaky vagina, like entering your bloodstream and stuff? And the guy, and he's like a leading expert in this, was like, I'm not sure, which blew my freaking mind. And moreover, Liz, his company actually also sells a vaginal sequencing kit. So he even thinks about and works on vaginal bacteria. And the question apparently had yet to cross his mind, the bacteria we're sequencing in these vagina may have something to do with all the gut microbiome supplements in, testing that we also promote at our company. But like those thoughts apparently like haven't crossed. And that's what makes me think I'll have this job for a little while longer, because my questions are not that hard. All I ask people is, were females included? Did you consider sex when doing this experiment or this innovation or this design? And so often the answer is no. I mean, even car safety today is not required to have a female test dummy. So all those commercials, especially around the holidays, I always feel like it's the worst during the holidays because they have like end of year sales, and they're always showing like families, like, you love your family, so take care of them on your road trips by getting the safe card. I'm like, only if your family is consisting of 190-pound Caucasian males, because that's the only test dummy all of these like data points are based off of. So it's definitely an issue in all industries.
Do they test with kids at all? Do you know?
I think they do have kids, but mostly for the car seat stuff,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But in terms of crash test dummies, it is still, reach out to Peter Buttigieg, Pete, because he's actually the head of like the transportation department, and he's the guy who would sign off on requiring female test dummies, which the first ones were invented in about, I think it was like 2014. Somebody finally even invented a female structure test dummy with our hip width and our our different proportions, and but it's still not required to be used. I know. I'm so grateful to be a chronic optimist, because if I wasn't, this industry would just it would chop me down. But I love it because there's such an essence of collaboration within all of the innovators, like you, Liz. I feel like I just naturally click with people that I meet in this industry. Like, we have some similar objectives, we have similar, mindsets, and our Northern Star is that women deserve better. So at the end of the day, like, it's a really great industry to be a part of, even if it's frequently filled with sad facts.
Right. Yeah, there's just a lot you can do in this space. It's pretty open because there's just been so little attention. You
Much opportunity. Yeah. I was interviewing a guy who did a biodesign program. So biodesign is this idea that like you make a team of a business person, a physician, and like an engineer, and then you send them into a hospital system for 1 year, and they just have to observe every department, and they take notes. And at the end of the year, they come up with a list of all the potential solutions that the system needs. And then they pick one and you start a company. So this is like the Stanford model. And he said that after rotating through the obstetrics and gynecology departments, they had 400 areas of improvement, 400 companies they could have started. Absolutely insane. Oh, if you want to know what he ended up doing, was there were the company's called NUA Surgical, NUA Surgical, and what they've done is, and this is mind blowing, but it's the first ever medical device that holds open the abdomen while a woman is having a C-section. And when he told me this, I said, well, what the hell is opening up her stomach now? Like, what? And you know what the answer is, Liz? The answer is hands. hands.
That's
They have two nurses, one on either side, whose hands are in your abdomen holding you open so that the physician can remove the baby. And so women with C-sections, I didn't know this, but they get sent home with a shit ton of antibiotics because it is such a major surgery. And because even the physician knows people's hands were in your abdomen, like literal forearms were inside you on every, all up in there. And so, he's creating what essentially is the most simplest thing I've ever seen, which is a giant circle that kind of cranks open and holds open your abdomen, which it's like, yeah, duh. Like this is the most common serious surgery in the world. And we're currently
especially in
using
the
our
US.
hands. Yes. Yes. So
Oh my
anyways,
God.
speaking of opportunity, they're everywhere, y'all. If you want to make money, if you want to make impact, come innovate in women's health. We'll give you a list.
Yeah, this guy or gal has
It's a
a list
guy,
of
it's a
like
dude.
400.
Yeah. Yep. We'll
Yeah.
give you a list of 399.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is insane. That's
Yeah. I always tell people, like, if you want to innovate in women's health, just look at the current tools and tests we have and just update it. Because what happens so often in women's health is that people think good enough is good enough. And so we're still, like, for example, is when you go and get your pap smear, which I hope you do, females, go get your pap smear, go get your cervix swabbed. They always tell you, like, hey, a little bit of blood might happen, it's a little uncomfortable. That's because we're still using swabs that have like these little like incisors on it that literally cut you. We just lived through a pandemic where we put these little soft Q-tips in our nose. We don't need to be cutting anything anymore to collect enough cells to do the experiments we have to do to see if you have cancerous cells. Like the fact that our swabs still have metal spikes in them and they're cutting us and they're just being like, oh, it's really uncomfortable and you'll bleed the rest of the day. But like, this is being a lady. Like, it's crazy. Like somebody just make soft swabs. Okay. Can someone make a soft swab and like a warmed up speculum? Because did you know that the KY jelly they use in obstetrics office kills your flora? I just recently learned this. That the KY jelly,
the lubricant.
Yep, the KY lubricant that they use in your physician's office kills your flora. You are going to the physician, and it's essentially like taking an atomic bomb to your vagina. And so there's cases of women going for their annual and then having to come back 3 more times because then they got all these infections because their flora was messed up, and then the yeast got out of control, and they had BV and discharge and a UTI. And all of it was because the lubrication we're using in the office isn't actually made for us.
Yeah, even though it's approved as God, I'm gonna trip over my words on this. But it's basically approved as basically a medical device for the lubricants, which is that's a whole, oh my God. I wanted to do another topic at some point on just like lubes, because that space is insane in terms of like, what's approved, what's not. Certain things have been developed that are better since that, whatever codes and whatever, whatever definition there is for lube. But yeah, we're still using KY jelly and a bunch of these others that are known to mess up your flora in some way. It's insane.
Yes, Liz. Yes. And I would love to hear that episode, because what I've heard is that even quote unquote vagina safe lubes essentially just have a probiotic where the lubrication still kills your flora, but at least they're providing a probiotic to get you back on track faster, which, okay, that's a step in the right direction, but I would really love to hear from a lube expert. And I know there's somebody out there. You probably know them. I don't know them yet, but lube experts, where are you? Reach out to Liz, because I want to know if there really is a vagina safe lube or not, or if it just is probiotic versions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's okay. So like, okay, I'm getting a little riled up here in terms of just all of the stuff. Like,
yeah.
It seems like one of the big gaps in like just like bringing products to market, and this is my experience with Lioness too. You've touched on it in this episode too, is having stuff get approved, whether it's like FDA cleared, FD or FDA approved,
Yeah.
different distinctions there, or having like insurance billing codes to be covered by insurance for certain things. Like
Yeah.
who do people what doors do people knock on in order to get to like expedite that part and make it known to that, like who are those people, what what do people do to like make it known that hey, this is something that's important? Since I think that's like one of the big gaps where like you hear all these cool stories of like, you're making this cool like C-section device that makes it
Mm-hmm.
so much easier, or you're making lube that doesn't like mess up the vagina in some shape or
Yep.
form. And like, yeah, that's great, but how do we get that approved to be available and be available for a
Yeah.
lot of people?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I wish
Big
I could
question.
say,
I
okay,
know.
call this number, email this email.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Tweet this
um,
person.
honestly, that roadmap is being set right now, and I'd like to say that FemTech Focus is absolutely contributing to that. We're raising the flag, we're raising awareness, and what I'm finding happening is experts in billing codes, experts in FDA approval processes. These are people who have been doing it for decades. They know what they're doing, and they themselves haven't either. They've never, caught wind of this discrepancy, or maybe they always did but they didn't know how bad it was. But now that there's a femtech movement, people are talking about it. There's podcasts now like this, right? There's a lot more awareness of it. These individuals, I notice, are actually spinning out into their own kind of boutique consulting firm. So I do have a small list of experts that I trust in terms of FDA process or billing code creation. They are wondering how to structure their boutique business model, because so many femtech companies are very, very early stage without funding. And so there is a
Mhm.
little bit of a pull and tug there where, these are people who are just working at Blue Cross Blue Shield making stupid amounts of money. And now they're like trying to ask a founder for $1,000 a month to consult them. And the founder's like, I don't have it. Right. So
Mhm.
that's their own complication. And I'm interested to see how that gap is going to be bridged. But I would say that is our current roadmap, is that there are experts that have been doing this not specifically for women's health, but now they're passionate about it, and they're either donating their time or highly discounted, or I'm telling them to, and maybe a listener here knows about the process, go mentor at a program, join the FemTech Focus virtual community, introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm an expert in this. And if you want some, engineering design, if you want to understand how the FDA sees this, or how to apply for a grant at NIH, like, I know how to do that really well, and I want to help you do it. So I would say it's very grassroots, very community based. But you know what? A lot of women's health has always been that way. I was just actually interviewed on the Wall Street Journal about the Roe versus Wade overturning, and she said, how can tech companies help this? And I said, this is not a problem. This is a problem that's already existed, right? Like, this is all because of the lawsuit with the one clinic in Mississippi. We already had an abortion access problem. Like, that's not new. It's just worse
Right.
now. And there
Right.
have been grassroots community efforts for many, many years now, helping women, females, and get an abortion, or access to contraception or what have you. And so I don't think the answer is like, Bayer's going to open up this new like pipeline program for femtech companies. I think it's going to be a mixture of the big players coming in and like giving up a lot of resources and time for the femtech companies, but also how do we engage those community groups and nonprofits that have been doing this for a long time, and they've thought about the things that you're currently thinking about, and they know if it works or not.
It's fair. Yeah, I guess the other thing I'm just sort of thinking about, like, just kind of out loud, is it like this would probably be more with some of the like mid-size or bigger firms, but
Mm-hmm.
it could be sort of like what law firms do for startups, where they like in exchange for equity or
Yeah,
like a lower cost fee, you could provide basic services for
that's
something
right.
or limited services.
Yeah.
and with the promise of like, oh, you're going to sign on after like a year for
That's
the
right.
regular rate or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have to be
like,
creative.
yeah,
And
find the
then
person
you
who,
know
yeah,
what? Someone's going to write the book. You know, there's going to be blogs about it. Hey, my experience getting through the FDA. Hey, my, you know, experience fundraising for the sex toy. Hey, here's a book on, you know, other people's experiences. I just actually signed a publishing deal. So hopefully in the next year, you'll be reading my book on FemTech, and I definitely anticipate a
ooh,
chapter on business models and stuff. And so, obviously it's not going to be a book that like is a single case study, but I anticipate once people start to get to the point that they've got it and they've done it several times, maybe some of these advisors have done it 10 times, and then they're like, all right, there's actually a formula here, let me get this out to the world, you know. So I'm waiting
right,
on that to happen. We need enough successes that it becomes like a pattern or a protocol that we can publish, and then everyone references.
right. Okay, yeah, let me know when that book comes out, because I
Well,
will I will be buying that book. Let your publisher know you have a buyer.
yes. Yay, I have one pre-sale.
Woo!
I'm famous. I made it.
Oh man. Yeah, no, it's such, yeah, it's such a, yeah, it's such a complex problem, and yeah,
Hmm.
there's so, yeah, it's sort of a to be continued
Yep,
type of
that's
thing.
right.
But
That's right.
yeah, so we've covered a lot about femtech, a lot about your experience now working in femtech, and this is something I meant to cover at the very beginning, but I think it's still worth covering here. Like, how did you get into what now is known as femtech, but wasn't even
Hmm.
femtech when you were starting to dabble in things?
Yeah. Well, I think that my story goes very far back in terms of, you know, I'm a leader in an industry that is under resourced and under researched and brand new. And it takes a very specific person, a unique person to take on that charge. And so I'll just kind of open up a little bit about my background. I come from several generation of people living in trailer parks. So I grew up in a trailer park. I did not come from a family that went to college. I'm the first person in my family to even go to college. I was not talked to about college growing up. Honestly, for me, my childhood was a lot more about survival. My dad had a hunting accident when I was 6 years old and had a traumatic brain injury. So I had a disabled father and
Mm.
had a mom who worked two jobs to try to keep things together. And, you know, I learned a lot of independence from that. I feel like I grew up and matured really young. And I'm always a tinkerer, I'm a problem solver, and I'm very intuitive. And so, you know, for any listeners that think, you know, like, oh my God, my childhood was so hard or so this or so that, like, and maybe you even struggled today with PTSD. I'm very open on my journey of PTSD recovery. Obviously, it's a chronic condition that I still maintain, you know, subside my symptoms on a daily basis. But all of that makes me a badass founder. All of your story makes you a badass founder, because if people just gave you things, if the world just said, hey, here's your timeline, here's your path, like just walk straight and you'll be great, you don't understand, you know, what it feels like to fall in a hole. And when you work on a startup, you fall in holes on a weekly basis. You know,
Right. Yeah.
your bank's overdrawn, this thing didn't happen, you know, you freaking, you know, yesterday, you know, my purse was stolen this weekend and I'm rolling with the punches. It was holiday weekend. I don't have a phone. I totally forgot to post my own podcast episode yesterday. And the guest is emailing me like, we don't see the episode. Crisis,
Oh no.
right? Fires everywhere. But at the end of the day, I'm cool, calm, and collected, because I also know what really in the world, in life, what really needs my concern. You know, what's really, you know, groundbreaking problems versus like, whoopsies, I'll post it next Monday, you know, like, sorry about that. Life's kind of crazy right now. And so I just wanted to,
Right.
take a moment to encourage people who think, because I didn't see myself at the podium. And when I say I didn't see myself, I do mean, as a female, but I also mean like, surely that person doesn't have as bad of a home life as I do. Like they're not holding onto the secrets that I have to hold on to because of what's happening at home. Um, and as I've grown and as I've shared more openly about my story, believe it or not, almost everyone who's successful has like dyslexia, trauma, loss, grief, like all of these things that are making them hard workers and seeing opportunity where most people couldn't. So I just wanted to, kind of just throw that out there, that if you're listening and you think Liz is awesome, if you think my story might be inspiring to you, or, you may just be walking in the world wondering like, can I make it? Honestly, you probably are overqualified. You are so going to make it, and go for it. This is an industry that needs you. And so, you don't have to have special skills to work in femtech. You just have to have a passion for women's health.
Yeah. I think it's great that you mentioned that, because I've heard so many times too, like people who are like, I'm just this, or I
Yeah.
just came from this, or or I had this experience. Like, what makes me able to start a company, to fundraise, to
Mm,
do, or to be, to be a lawyer, to be, or to be whatever that person is
yep.
aspiring to be. I've heard that sort of sentiment like so many times
Hmm.
from people, like wanting, like aspiring to do something. And yeah, it's like, yeah, uh, you know, like for on my side, it's like, yeah, there isn't like a vibrator degree, like a vibrator maker degree, or like
Yeah.
it's like, because I get the question of like, how do people, or how did you get into this? And it's like, well, I went to college and I got a
Yeah.
vibrator maker, vibrator engineer degree, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like I wish it were that easy, but no, it's like you kind of like pick yourself eventually to do a thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does take a lot of guts to be like, yeah, I am this person who can do this, and I
Yeah.
will do this and make these steps, and then present myself as like, I am this really cool person who can do this thing.
Yep. Yep.
It's it's difficult, but
And
it can be done.
also, if you fail and fall on your face, good on you. Like whatever. Whatever. You lived your life. You're just
Yeah.
doing it, I my first startup was a DNA-based dating app, and it was a crazy idea I had in college, and then I was so upset about the 2016 election that I wanted to become a woman of influence, and I thought, well, hell, I have this crazy business idea. What if I all of a sudden became a multimillionaire because of it? And then I can like influence change that I want in the world. And that business did not make me a multimillionaire. And I raised a bunch of funding money and built a team and ran the company for 2 years. And long story short, the company closed. But there was definitely a season of mourning and like questioning myself and my capabilities. But I look back at that now and I'm like, I am a badass, man. I'm a rock star. I did something. Like, I had this crazy idea and I freaking pursued it. And I can always say that I did it. Like, did it end in the result I wanted to? No. But that's the thing about the universe, is that the results it comes up with are oftentimes way better than you could have even imagined. And so it set me up for a
It's true.
successful journey into venture capital and investing and being a founder. And like, there are founders today who've created one company and it's successful, and now they want to be a mentor. And it's like, how can you, which is amazing. And I think that's awesome. But also, I know part of my secret sauce as a mentor to founders is that I have had to close my company. I have had to send that email to my investors saying the company's closing and you're not getting your money back. Like, how many people can say they've written that email? Like, it's a tough email to write. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and it happens a lot
and it
too,
happens
like,
so often, so often. So if you're one of them, like, good on you. Like, if it's recent, it probably still sucks for you. But I promise, one day you'll look back and be like, I can always say that I did that.
right. Yeah. And now, I mean, what you did before was really cool, like, don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, but now you're like doing all these different, you're addressing all these different topics now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in femtech, which is, it's like including in an indirect way, like the what you were working on before.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah,
Totally.
you just you became I don't want to say evolved because I always think of like Pokemon and like
Oh
evolution
yeah.
sort of thing, but like, like, but like you're always like, we're always becoming better people when we try something and
Yeah.
then it fails or it goes a different direction, or that sort of thing.
I know that
So
people used to
yeah.
say the phrase like one door closes, one door opens, and I believe that. I like to think of it more like it every journey is a launch pad to your next one. I think of like little mini trampolines and I'm like jumping on them and I'm going one and higher and going because it's not just like, oh yeah, this door shut and now I'm just going to turn around to my left and open that door. Like it's more like this door shut, i.e. I left this launch pad and I'm accelerating to the next launch pad, and it's gonna throw me forward into the next one. So the universe has some great plans, and I'm turning 31 today, and I am excited to see like what the next 9 years has for me because it's been awesome. It's been so awesome.
Okay, so where all right. So yeah, this has been fun catching up with you, Britt. Where can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me if they love to listen to podcasts. They can find my podcast on any streaming service, Spotify, iTunes. It's called FemTech Focus. You can also join our newsletter. So go to femtechfocus.org and subscribe there. You can also join our virtual community. You can do that right from the website as well, femtechfocus.org. And in the virtual community, I hold weekly office hours. So if you are someone with an idea, or you want to work in women's health, or you just want to chat with me, I do offer 30-minute slots that you can sign up for. And I'd love to meet you all.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this has been super fun to catch up with you.
Yes.
And hopefully we can see each other in person at some point again.
Yes, definitely. I'd love that,
Yeah.
Liz.
Yeah. Let me know when you're in California. Awesome. All right. I'm going to